So I think you make an interesting point when you say that you thought that the sensitive period of child development was older, because that makes sense. I kind of thought the same thing. I actually thought, I don't know, there was like about the sensitive period until I started reading the textbook, and I just thought it was just everything as you grew up just like changed and interacted. I mean, it does, but those first 2 years are one of the most important few years, and I didn't know that it was those 2 years have so much development because there's this. It's really young, and like a lot of stuff can happen when you're just like a baby. You don't really have any control over yourself or what you do, so you're pretty much dependent completely on your parents. And if you don't have parents, then that's going to be an issue for you. And like textbook talked about kids in orphanages who did pretty poorly with um, in their schoolwork and in um, their emotional coping and emotional reactivity because they were in orphanages and they didn't really get quality time with adults. Even just some quality time with adults is really helpful. Textbook also mentioned children in child care in good daycare centers, which they said were actually pretty hard to come by. But a child in good child care can help kind of reduce the negative effects of a bad home environment. So yeah, that is a really sensitive development period. It's kind of interesting that it's just those two so early years that can just affect you in your whole life. And it was also interesting that you brought up adoption too, because the textbook also talked about that like there was adopted children. They had the example of the one baby who's the family adopted her after her mother was homeless, and the child was kind of uh, unstable, kind of freaking out, emotionally reactive, would kind of turn away from her adopted parents because of things that happened to her when she was young, but her biological mother loved her and had that connection with her, so she was still able to overcome what happened when she was even younger. But she was also a very young infant when she was adopted, the example they used, so it's very much easier. It's very easier for to learn these things and to learn how to cope and to learn how to handle your emotions if it's taught when it's supposed to at that young age, if your needs are met, if your parents are sensitive and give good caregiving. And it's possible to overcome all that stuff later in life because once you become an adult, and once you get older, even as a teenager, an older child, you have more control over yourself and your thoughts, and you can understand and teach yourself like new coping skills and teach yourself how to handle it. But sometimes it's just there's a lot, and there's going to be a difference between a child who didn't get that good caregiving and even in adulthood, the adult who didn't get the good caregiving as a child and the adult who did. But the thing I found most interesting in the textbook in relation to that is it was talking about how those kind of unattached children who didn't get good caregiving, when they grow up and have their own kids, it's not a solid predictor of how they're going to treat their kids, how they're going to attach to their kids, how they're going to give care to their kids based on their parents. It was based on, like, are they still holding grudges against their parents? Did they forgive their parents? Do they have understanding for their parents? So it's you can overcome it. It's harder. It's definitely harder, but the the main takeaway is that you can't hold grudges and just hate your parents for something that happened like that because it's not going to help you as an adult or your children.